Hey guys, this is Tolly and welcome to Let's Build a JRPG Part 13, I believe we're on. Primarily the topic for today is going to be victory conditions. When we last left off, we were kind of jumping around in the world building stuff. We had set up like screen transitions. I guess I could quickly go there if I can find it. I can. And we kind of had like been doing a little bit of world building, but also a couple little scripts were made just so that we could transition between scenes and also transition the player between different areas of the environment. So if we walk here, we can transition to the forest scene that we were working on, still very much a work in progress. We can walk around this hill and it's great, and we can't go back because there's a problem with the camera logic that we haven't fixed yet. I still need to fix that at some point. And then we also made it so that when we transition between different zones in the same scene, if we walk this way, we can teleport, does a little fade, but we haven't actually switched scenes there. We've just moved the character from the end of this hallway over to this hallway over here. So that's kind of where we had left off. We were mostly just lazily doing some level design, kind of setting up some zones, doing some things, and some stuff was still broken. Right, so today though, I want to depart from all of this and I want to go back to our sample scene, which was the actual RPG combat side of it. I want to check on how all of this is doing. Looks like everything's good. I assume my audio is okay. Looks like everything should be fine. All right, and it's loaded. So if we attack this ghost character, we can see that the character performs an attack. We missed, so that's lame. We can attack again. In the last couple streams, I've been saying the next thing we needed to tackle was HP and getting characters to actually lose health. I was actually mistaken in that it's been a while since we've worked on this project. I had forgotten that we had already kind of handled that. I had seen in the goals tab that we have up here at the top that I need to do visualizing HP, more types of abilities, and importing stats from design data. I had misread that as need to get stats hooked up. In fact, we already have stats hooked up. I completely lost track of the fact that we already had stats components being created on all of our characters, and if we go into debug mode, we can see that they actually are losing health. So this stat here, it's an array of lists, but I know that element 2 is the HP. He has 94. If we perform another attack on the ghost takes more damage and goes down -5. He's now at 89, so on and so forth. So we actually already have taking damage being applied. We're just not visualizing that damage, which is fine. We can technically leave that. I think when we were working on this a while ago, that was a big thing for me, is like, oh, we gotta get health showing up. I don't think it really matters whether or not you know how much health a guy has left. It's more important that you can kill a guy. That's what I'm more concerned about right now. So I want to try and tackle killing enemies and getting victory conditions set up. So in that vein, I'm going to go back over to our kind of main reference point, which is the Liquid Fire gaming blog, which is what we've been referencing for a lot of this setup. His tactical RPG, although we're doing just a standard JRPG, a lot of this stuff still works quite well. And the thing we need is the knockout status effect. So this stream, I might do a little bit more reading than I have been. I didn't do as much prep, so we're going to kind of parse through this together, and we're going to figure out what pieces we need for our game and which pieces of this tutorial we can kind of leave behind. So this is kind of all dealing with victory conditions, this whole section. So now that we have enemies, we can provide an actual goal for the battle. First, we must actually defeat enemies as well as risk defeat for our own units. There needs to be a consequence for units' hit points dropping to 0. So we'll add a knocked out status effect, which disables a unit from taking actions or additional turns. Likewise, there should be an effect for defeating all enemies or all our heroes perishing. These are sample victory conditions which we will track and will allow to end the battle. Okay. So the knockout status effect is really what we're looking for here. It can be removed with stuff like the revivability. Again, I love following Liquid Fire's blogs because everything is more future-proofing. Like, because we could get enemies to stop functioning, but the fact that it's being set up in such a way via following along with his amazing tutorials is we can have stuff like this where we eventually can just add a revive to get rid of knocked out, which I may not have thought that far ahead if I was just building this from scratch. At this moment, the status effect is responsible for 3 basic things: visual indication of KO, Disabling and incrementing the status turn counter. We don't actually have a turn counter because we're going using an ATB system right now, an action time. What does the ATB stand for again? I don't remember. And then disabling the abilities to take turns, which we will actually kind of need. Although honestly, because we're using an ATB system, we might get this by just disabling the unit. We'll figure that part out. And then we have the actual code for the knocked out status effect itself. So it's a status effect. It grabs the owner, which is the unit, and the stats. On enable, we do some transformy things. We add some observers for turn check, and stat counter will change. I don't think we're going to need any of these pieces. Okay. Yeah, because this stuff is basically turning off turn check. Let's dive into the actual code. So I think I've brought some of these pieces in when we were streaming before. I'm just trying to get some of this stuff because the last couple streams we've been diving into level design. This will be the first one where I'm diving back into the code, and I'm just trying to figure out where we left off months ago. So it looks like in here I have my own knockout status effect, which came from with some other pieces that I had set up in a previous prototype that I used following this tutorial. It's a whole lineage of things, but regardless, I think the additional pieces that I have that wasn't in that tutorial is I have a ease component on death and on death fade complete, which is basically just moving the character into the ground on death and then turning off the skin mesh renderer, which basically just disables the physical object of the character, the mesh component. We also have an on animation event, which is to play. Okay, let's see what my comment says. Note, at this time, all this does is listen for the attack animation event and move on from the performed state. I think that's not what this does. I think this is a copy and paste comment. I think what this is doing is it's listening for an event from the animation, which is death, and when it hears death, it will then save whatever the position of the Y was, and then start playing the easing controller. I said in the last stream I wanted to replace all of these with DoTween, but I'm going to leave that for a later time. Just for those who followed along previously, I'll make that statement if you're wondering why it's still here. Okay, so this all seems fine. I don't think we're going to need this stats counter flip toggle and the KO flip toggle because we don't have a turn check that we're worried about. I don't think anyone's listening for these values. Yeah, I'm gonna have to dig around to figure out how I need to hook this up. Let's go back to the tutorial. But basically, I have one that's a little more advanced than it needs to be because I have some carryover logic from a previous prototype. Okay, so the KO status effect can be removed, but the question is who should be responsible for removing. There are two main options. The first option is that we could have the same class which inflicts the KO status effect be responsible for removing. This isn't always a great solution because the inflictor may need to go out of scope before the status needs to be removed. For example, if the enemy unit uses ability to inflict a status ailment, then you defeat the enemy, we could choose to remove that enemy from battle. Of course, if we did, then there would no longer be a status that had been inflicted, right? So if we hit them with something and then try and remove it later, the enemy may not be there, which means the thing we're trying to remove may not matter. So this dependency change could cause problems in the other direction as well. We could change the previous example so the enemy unit didn't die, but perhaps the status was cured by a different ability at the different time. When the duration of the current condition of the enemy ability would be completed, the enemy ability would try to remove the status. It wouldn't find it. Or it had maintained a reference, and there might be some other kind of problem if the status effect object had been destroyed or unparented from an unexpected hierarchy. Both of the previous problems are not an issue with using self-maintaining status condition components. For example, when an enemy inflicts a status effect, it normally attaches it with a duration status effect condition, then it does not need to be concerned with keeping any references to the removed status later, nor does it care if the different ability is used to cure it. This sort of custom component is our second option and is the option I've chosen for this case, creating a new script named status comparison condition, which is placed in the same folder as the status conditions. Did I grab that over from the template problem? The template, the previous project I worked on. There is a duration status condition here. What was the exact naming that he had in that script? Status comparison condition. We do not have that object. Okay. What does he want us to use that for in terms of getting to the point, which is victory conditions? So this thing here is a class, has some types, a value, a condition. It listens for if the type that it cares about has changed on status change. It initializes these specific values. It has some equal to, less than simple operators. On status change, if condition does not equal null and it does not condition. This is a bool operator. So if the operator has been set to something, which normally is set via this int, okay, then remove. And remove, I don't see. It's a semi-long script, but function-wise, it's very simple. It has a few fields, one of the type of the stat. Okay, so I'm going to just read this, which is going to give us a better overview than me trying to decipher it. Okay, so a type to observe, one of the value to compare against, and one for a simple delegate, which returns a bool data type. The script provides several convenient methods which can be used for the delegate equal to, less than, and you also are able to provide your own if necessary. Configuring the component by calling int method and passing along the parameters for each of those fields. We'll be able to use this script for KO status conditions by passing along a stat type of HP, a value of 0, and we can use equal to for our condition delegate. What this means is that every time the HP stat condition, the HP stat changes, the script will check whether or not 0 HP equals 0, and if not, then the condition will be removed. Assuming that this is the only condition causing the KO status, then the status will also be removed. Interesting. I think I remember why I didn't use this thing is at the time I don't think I really cared for it. I don't think it was like necessary because I hadn't got reviving. Once a character had died, they were just dead. So I may come back to this at a later point and try and integrate this later. Right now I'm more concerned with characters dying, but I know this is here when we want to go about reviving things. Auto status controller. Okay, next we need something to actually apply this KO status. So this is the thing I actually care about. Whether a unit's HP are reduced to 0, whenever a unit's HP is reduced there, then that could be done in the stats or health component, but I really like all my components to be as simple as possible and really just have a single job. For example, I could say that the job of health component is to maintain a relationship between two stats to make sure that the HP never holds a value less than the min or greater than the HP. I would need to use and in my job description to say that the component also applies to KO whenever one of the statuses reach 0, which really means that it's another job and suitable of another component. It's an interesting way of looking things. So this is probably where I diverge, as often I just stick stuff in wherever there's a convenient class, which is a bad habit. So I decided to create, but I'm going to try and follow as much of this from a baseline as possible, because, I don't know, make my code better in the long run when I'm building stuff up. So I decided to create a new script whose job is to apply status effects whenever it occurs as a result of an event rather than a direct action. So whenever something has changed that would apply a status effect instead of an enemy attacking, for example, would be how I interpret that. So when a player hits 0 HP, that may not be, that could be applied by a variety of different actions, but the event of HP equals 0 is something that's kind of more global, whereas the enemy has poison as a status effect on their ability is more of a direct action that would directly apply it. If the script were used to very large, were to get very large, I might drag it down to one script per status effect. For instance, now let's create an auto status controller and place this in the script controller directory. And this thing is pretty simple. On enable, check for on HP did change, or add an observer and remove the observer on enable and disable. On HP did change notification, we grab the stats of the sender. If its HP is 0, then we get the status, we add the status knocked out, and we do c.init HP 0, c is equal to. Oh, this is the condition. I see, I see. So he makes... So the way this is working is we're creating a knocked out status effect of the type status stat compare condition. The status effect. I'm not familiar with this syntax. Init with HP 0 equal to. So that's this init, which is stat HP, value 0, and this is the value which is unequal to. So if that condition is true, which would be equal to, then if stat equals value, then remove. And I think remove is actually inside of base status condition. Let's go dig into that real quick. So status condition, stats, status. Yeah, remove is a base function of status. I see, I see. So the way this is set up, it'll auto-remove itself. I get it now. I see all the puzzle pieces. So maybe we do want this script then. I think I'm going to bring this piece in. And we're going to just follow his example as best we can. So this is a duration status condition, so we want it in the same spot here. Status condition, okay. So I think we just want to go in here and we want to create a new C# script. Unity's taking its time to import things. Still not positive, though, on this syntax. This is something I'm not familiar with. Because this is a status effect. This inherits from status condition. This is status.add. Maybe this is just functionality I haven't looked at in a while. Is that just how status is written? It is. The add functionality of this is a status effect and a status condition. Okay. Okay, that's why that syntax is weird to me, because it's custom written. Okay. So we're bringing in this stat comparison condition, which is a new type of status condition. We want to save that. We want to rename this value. And if this is a condition, it should go in the condition folder. Yeah, I think when I set this up originally, I just didn't bother. Unity really likes reopening Visual Studio every 5 seconds. Alright. There it goes again. I'm gonna move... Why is it doing that? It's like every time the project updates, it decides that it wants to reopen Visual Studio. That's not a problem I have on my work PC. It's only on my home PC that I have that issue. I have no idea why. Switch this out of debug back into normal. Okay. So then the next piece of the puzzle we need is actually this very simple script, which will be the auto status controller. Which goes into the scripts controller directory. Actually, step one is to not lose my tabs. I want this name, and then I don't think we have that folder directory yet. Scripts controllers. All of the stuff from Liquid Fire blog stuff is in here. Let's do a quick check for controller. Most of the keyword controller is going to come up with actual like animation controller stuff. I'm looking down here, checking to see if it's... Yeah, this is all art assets. I don't think we have a folder for controllers yet. Mostly because we're jumping around through this Liquid Fire blog tutorial and only taking the pieces we need. So technically this is my scripts folder, so I'm going to add new folder for controllers. Okay, we're going to make a new script. It's going to be the auto status controller. The script will be attached to an object in the battle scene. I could have attached it to the battle controller object. Once this is done, you could play the scene and see how the KO works. Try attacking a single unit using until its HP reaches 0. It will squash down. Right. For me, it'll do something different. Wait a few turns to see if the defeated enemy is not allowed to take a turn. Now use another unit to revive the KO unit. It should scale back to normal and be allowed to take turns again. Okay, we won't have any of that functionality, but that's fine. It's a pretty simple script. Grab this boy, put it in here. Missing a bracket. Okay. So this thing will just always a good idea to read all of your code thoroughly. So this thing is gonna, especially when you're grabbing from other tutorial-y type sites, to make sure that the thing does the thing you think it does. So on enable and disable, it's adding and removing notifiers. On HP did change. We check to see who the sender was, and we're going to listen for all events. So this will get hit from anyone. It doesn't need to be on a specific object. And then it'll go through, get the status, add a status which is knocked out using the status comparison condition, and it will remove itself if its HP is ever above 0. Okay. Think that should be good. Yeah, that should be good. Okay, so we just need to make sure to actually add that. I think the reason we don't have controllers is I opted to go with the naming scheme of managers. Some of this stuff is coming back to me. Auto status controller. And so now we should be able to test this, and the more accurate thing, or the more important thing I'm going to be trying to get online is RPG elements. knocked out status. The thing that I'm going to be testing more around is this death trigger. I don't think we have that hooked up in our version yet. So we should see about doing that as like the first thing we do. There should be a death animation. And that's probably going to need to be for each of our toon characters. I'm also going to pull this project panel down. I can't. I'm going to remove it for now. That panel we put there mostly so that we could better do some level designy things, but I prefer to use this project one more so. The way we're going to find this is we're going to go into play mode. We're going to spawn all our enemies, and then we're going to select the appropriate object from there. Our thing is in free aspect. It should be in that resolution. There we go. So let's take a look at our ghost, because that's the one we'll target and kill. Ghost controller is here. Ghost animations. Ghost die. Events. It does not have any events. So I want to have a death event play at a specific frame in the animation. Which will be about there. Okay, and I want this event to send this keyword. So I want to have this string, death event. That's not right. That's the function name, which needs to be on animation event. And then death. And hit apply. Do I have to hit a... Oh, it's been a little bit. This is the part that gets me the most, is setting up these events, because this is not something I have to do very often in my normal work. But in this situation, where would we find another example? Let's do another search for on death animation event and see if we can find another example where we had done this previously. On animation event? Received animation. Process animation event. This is the object. This thing here in Unit Factory gets added to our monsters and to our characters. And this thing here listens for... If I have an animator on start, I run through all animation events and I set the object reference parameter of those events to me. So I don't have to worry about setting the object. This thing handles that for me. But I do need to make it that event function that we're listening for, and then that should be it. Okay, and now we should be able to stop hitting play. That broke everything apparently. There is where I want it to start sinking into the ground. Oh wait. Oh no, that event's still there. Just lost its values. Death. Apply. Now ideally, I'm not a huge, I shouldn't have to add this to every single object, or add this event every time I add a new character. I still feel like I want to build a tool or some sort of system that will kind of figure out where these events should be for like death. Although it might be something that just manually has to be done. Like manually I have to add death for each new character. It just feels like the type of thing that could be like automated out. But it's kind of hard to automate something as specific as like the frame at which the character dies. Okay, now to make this a little easier on myself, I'm going to go into the Unit Factory and change the health of an enemy down to 1. Unit Factory, max HP will set to 1, which means its HP will get set to 1 on start. and then we should be able to attack the ghost and it should die. It should hear the death animation ideally. Like, more than likely none of this is going to work, but we're going to work through actually fixing it. Although fingers crossed, it just everything just happens. So it should receive the knocked out status effect, which means it should die. Attack, ghost. It takes damage. Okay, so it didn't just work. Let's take a look in debug mode. Did its health get set to 0? Its health did get set to 0. Did the auto status controller not activate? Is that the problem? Let's put a breakpoint in here. So this should add the knocked out status effect. In fact, we should be able to just check that even without having to do a breakpoint. Does this thing have... Okay, breakpoint set. Does this thing have... the status effect for death? Everything is running very slow now that I've attached the debugger. Okay. Detaching the debugger. Computer is having a hard time handling that and streaming and everything else. I'm not seeing a status. Okay. Now we have to reattach the debugger. We're going to hit play. We're going to attack the enemy one time. Come on. I know you can do it. Times when you think you might need to upgrade your PC. The main thing is it hitting that on status? On HP did change notification. That's really the thing we're listening for. The other thing I can do while I'm waiting for all this to load up is double check to make sure that's actually coming from somewhere. This call? Let's expand this window down here. It's kind of small. We want to see if there's any sendings. Post. Yeah, this is inside of status whenever a value changes. That should be getting set when we set the HP. On status change. I assume this is for first setup. Let's put the breakpoint inside so it doesn't hit it as we do the initialization. Okay, so Ghost is here. Ghost has 1 HP. We will set that breakpoint back to here to make sure that we're actually getting into the function at all. Hit the Ghost. We do an attack. The attack does a hit. This is the moment when the HP changes. It now has 0 HP. Get component in children's status. Did we get anything? We got null. That's the problem. We're not adding the status component to our objects. That's where we're running into an issue. Okay, stop the debugger. So the children, or the get in children's get status is failing because we don't add a status. So inside of Unit Factory, we need to make sure for each of these we add a status component. That should be the missing link. Okay. Okay. All right. Good. We are figuring it out. Now it is just a matter of running it multiple times as we slowly work through these individual problems. Welcome to game development. A lot of incremental work. Did that work? No. Did that work? No. Did that work? Yes. Awesome. Moving on. All right, let's see. We hit the Ghost. The Ghost has the status. It has the status effect. Okay, so it has the knocked out status effect. But it didn't play the actual death animation that I have set up for it. So that's next steps. So we did apply a status effect. It is now knocked out, but we didn't get an animation event. So we want to listen for here. Now here's another thing that's really quick. Like if you're running on a kind of bad computer that's like, say, being super stressed by having to stream and debug and run Unity, then another way that you can kind of debug games is pretty simply just debug.log. There was a period of time where I couldn't get, like, I've been working on Unity for 10 years, and there was a period of time where, like, getting Unity, like the debugger to attach to Unity was kind of a huge thing, and it was annoying, and I just didn't want to put in the effort, and I spent probably a couple years of my life just debugging everything with debug.log. It can be done. It can totally be done. Death message received. Death message computed. Death fade. Death fade complete. Now our console will tell us a bunch of information that will be semi-effective compared to actually putting in breakpoints. The tricky thing is adding and removing that code. It's slightly more time consuming. Window, add console. We've lost our console at some point. General console. I'm going to put that console over here. I like it here a little bit more, rather than in line with the inspector. Generally, when I'm looking at the console, I'm not looking at the project files. Let's hit play, and let's kill that ghost. Got like 4 lurkers today. 2 on YouTube, 2 on Twitch. Even split. So, did not get any. This has the animation receiver. We did not get any animation messages. Okay. Okay. So next step would be to go one step sooner, because we didn't get into this call. So did we, at the very least, get into process animation event, and then we'll add the string to see which processed animation events we got. Okay. Could also add the game object as well in that debug, actually, just to give us a little bit more information. Game object dot name. This will give us the name of the object in which the script is on, which hopefully should be Ghost or Heroes. There are times where I feel like debug.log is a little more convenient in some of these cases, like when you're in the middle of debugging down. If I had to put in a breakpoint there, it's kind of harder to grab GameObject.name to figure out which object this script is on. Sometimes when you're debugging in Unity, unless there's something that's recently changed that I don't know about. I'm not always up to date on all of the latest Unity stuff. So if we look at the console and we hit attack, there should be at least an attack animation. There was a wizard process animation, nothing. Cool. So the wizard didn't attack. And when that wizard didn't attack, well, there's some problem with the vertex buffer. Not my concern right now. So there was a nothing animation. It had no string passed in. I'm going to assume that's on hit. That we set a basic animation for all of our characters. We need to collapse some of these folders. Let's close all of this stuff for the time being. Close all of that. Okay, so in here, there should be an animation section for basic attack. Which attack are we using? Let's take a look at our design data. If we bring this over for our ability design data, the characters are using melee attack right. for the attack ability, and right now all of our characters are using attack except for the archer, which is using the ability attack ranged, which uses the crossbow reload animation. But this is the one we're looking for. I'm just trying right now. I'm pretty sure this is how this works. I don't actually have to look this up, but I just want to clarify. Let's go back to normal view instead of debug. Events. This does have one event, which is just a process. It's just calling an event with no information. There is no parameters being passed in, which is what we see here. There is a wizard called a process animation event. So someone must just be listening for this event from the wizard. Let's pull this up a little bit further. Play animation ability state. Yep, this adds and removes an observer. It doesn't do anything with the arguments or the parameters. It just changes the state to resolve. So once we get to a specific keyframe in the character's attack animation, we move states into the actual, like, deal the damage, I assume. We haven't looked at any of this state stuff in a while, but on enter, we set trigger to take damage and a bunch of other stuff. Okay, so that all makes sense. Is it that I don't call... Is it more likely that on death, we don't play the animation? This is playing... Yeah, that's the problem. Nothing's saying die to the character. This death animation is for once the character has played death, but what am I actually doing to kill the character? Nothing. So someone needs to play the death animation on the enemy. So where do we want to play that animation to? Who wants to be in control of that? I'm a little surprised that it isn't already inside of the knocked out status effect. Based off what we read in the Liquid Fire blog tutorials, I feel like I should really be separating some of this stuff into other scripts, but let's just get it working for now. Maybe it's just on... We are sending a knocked out status effect death animation notification. This is other, like, carried over code from a previous project. Is that originally how I handled that? Someone was probably listening for this and then playing the animation. I probably had an animation controller. For the time being, though, I think... Because this is where the on-enable, the squash was happening. We can kind of uncomment that code, and this should at least show us what happens when the character dies. Should give us some response for the character death. But I think the missing link here to get this script hooked up again is mostly just playing the death animation when the character dies. Yeah, so he got squashed. So I think there is where we want to put in the play. And for now, rather than setting up an animation controller, let's just play death on this character. The problem is I don't know what the death is. Okay, let's try... Let's try looking at the resolve, not the resolve. Let's take a look at the play animation state. How were we playing the attack animation? We were doing get character model prefab set bool relax. Set trigger animation. Prefab being the animator. This is actually the animator of the character model. Does the enemy have a similar parameter? Again, some of this, like, this video is almost more, hey, have you never worked on a project or haven't worked on a project in a while? Here's kind of what happens when you have to ramp back up again. It's just kind of the reality. There's this period of time where it's like, I don't remember half of this, but I remember some of it, and kind of going down the roads of like, just find reference over and over again, trying to figure out where everything sits. This character model is used in the character combat controller. There's a monster model as well. The monster also has a prefab. That prefab gets used to call take damage. So this is the call we want. Target ID being the monster who's taken damage. This is get monster model. And this comes from target ID. Target ID comes from a list of targets. So the question is, how do I get the monster model from inside of the knocked out state? It's always coming from a target ID. And that's going to be an integer? No, each monster has its own ID. And that ID is stored inside of the monster model. But the monster model isn't a part of the unit yet. This was kind of something that we were running into a problem with last time, if I remember correctly as well, is that really the monster model, most of its data should be stored inside of the unit, not inside of this class here. Because this data really should be accessible from death, and it's not right now. It's a primary problem. Right now it gets set on initialize. Yeah, so this monster model kind of existed when we were doing the initialization of the actual prefab, but before the unit factory stuff had been written. And I need this value in order to grab it in order to play the animation. The other option is, can we grab this animator directly for the time being? I want to rework a lot of this stuff, but I will be satisfied if I can just make it do a thing. Yeah, because see, I grabbed the unit here, but the unit doesn't have the information I need yet. I need to revamp the whole system. This knocked out status effect. I want a game object dot parent. Game object. This is really bad. I hate this. I'm gonna make a dot parent. Can I not get my parent? I don't want to get component in parent. I want to get my parent. Is that under transform? Is that why? Transform dot parent dot get components in children. In children animator. So this is bad. This is bad for a couple reasons. The main reason is that if there was ever multiple animators inside of that hierarchy, we don't guarantee which animator we're going to grab. This is why grabbing the unit ID and then doing the same thing we do in... Well, I've lost it. The same thing we do here, sorry, is get model, target ID, grab the prefab set would be way better because we know exactly which animator we're using. It's the animator that from the prefab. But this should work for now. Animator. I also don't love the fact that I named it prefab. It's kind of an awful name. I'll probably rename that as well when we actually do this. Okay. So now we have the animator, we can set a trigger. We need to figure out which trigger we need to set. So if we go into the game and we take a look at the ghost is already selected, so we should just be able to click on this animator. Die. We need to set the trigger die. When the status effect knocked out is enabled. Okay. Maybe that'll work. Come on, Unity. I believe in you. It's compiling. It's compiling scripts that have changed. Alright, so let's stop this. Let's run it again. One more time. Here we go. I attack the ghost that has 1 health. The ghost gets hit. It takes damage. It dies. And some really weird stuff happens. Okay. So we got the ghost processing an animation event, which was death. We got the death message received, death message computed, and then we called on death fade a whole bunch of times. Which is probably accurate because this is likely... Yeah, this has to get called a bunch. It's basically doing the transition. So main problem is that after it died, it went back to doing other things. That's going to be the primary issue. After it finished animating the death, it didn't fade away quite properly because it was stuck. Or it wasn't stuck. It went back to a standard animation. I don't need Toon Chest. I need our good friend Ghost. Here we go. Ghost, die. Once it's dead, it went back to idle, I think. Let's drag the ghost in to the scene. Well, let's play with a couple things. If we drag it in, okay, and we set it to fly forward. I want to just play with its animations for a second to see what it does. Okay, let's grab this ghost, which is clearly separate. And if we just do fly forward, it will fly forward. Bite. It bites. Okay, let's take a look at its animators. Let's drag that down into this screen here. So it's idling. We perform a die. It gets back up again. Okay, so the issue is that it goes back into its thing. It didn't process the animation event. That's fine. We're not too concerned about that. That's because this isn't the correct one. So it dies and it gets back up. It dies and it gets back up. So I want it to be locked in death. Is that something I need to change on the import settings? Animation. It's not looping. I feel like I want a clamp setting somewhere. Looking for the word clamp. I'm not seeing what I want. Can we do it inside of the animator then? Can we get rid of this event? What if it doesn't have an exit? What if we just have it die and it has no exit? That's what I want. I don't want it to exit on death. I want it to just stay on death. Okay. And that looks like a change that was saved. Let's delete this temporary ghost from the hierarchy. Let's hit play. And now it shouldn't get back up again after playing the animation. It should die and then stay dead. Then we just are more concerned about how far he transitions down into the ground. Well, it helps if we hit. Okay, it dies. So it's just not transitioning far enough down to disappear, which is probably to do with different scales. So we probably want this thing to go, this is all duration. We want this thing to lerp lower. So let's go to 1, double how far down it goes. That should get it below the ground. Probably the assets I was using this with before were slightly smaller than this ghost. So half a unit was enough to get it below. Unless I've scaled some of these pieces up, that's also possible. I can't remember all the set design stuff we did with setting up this RPG scene. Can't remember if we modified it. No, its scale looks to be 1. Okay, regardless, this should do it. So it takes damage, it dies, it fades into the ground, and then once it finishes fading into the ground, we don't have it appearing anymore because we turned off the mesh renderer. It's not my favorite way. In some ways I feel like I'd rather do this, turn off this piece, but I feel like I'm not turning off this piece because that disables all of the scripts, and then we can't have the auto condition logic actually turn this thing back on again. Okay. Again, more things to add to a backlog somewhere. In fact, let's start working on that. Let's bring up let's bring up the game data, and for the time being, let's just add a new tab in here, which is just going to be backlog. This is going to be a more larger list than basically our standard goals. So this goal sheet here is kind of more the immediate goals we're trying to get to, which honestly isn't updated, but in here I'm going to add a backlog of things. So one of the things I want to do is improve disabling of unit models, unit components, models, and particles, because some particles are still playing when a unit dies. It's pretty low, but I'm just going to write it down because I keep saying there's things in here that I'm like, I don't like the way this is written, or I don't like the way that's written. I'd like to change it, but I'm not writing it down, which means it's going into the ether. So anytime that I make a point of like, I don't like this, or I might want to change this, I really should be just scribbling it into a spreadsheet so that I'm aware of its existence. Okay, so units are now dying, and even better, I managed to hook up some old functionality I had from a previous prototype, so they don't just get squat, they actually fade into the ground. Let's get rid of these debug.logs. We now have kind of got this all working. We don't need these for extra information. Now, next thing is what happens when all my enemies die. First off, we're going to have to fix the controllers of each of the enemies probably to have their death not loop back or not go to exit. So we're going to load the game back up, click on each of them, click on their animators, and remove the little transition from death to exit. I'm assuming each of these use a different animator. They do. So we're not going to exit when the Cactus Man dies, and we're not going to exit when the Death Knight dies. Okay. Now in theory, when I kill each of these, they should each die, except I haven't hooked up the events. So he plays his death animation, but then just stays there. Which again, not the worst, but in case I want it, let's also hook up his death. So we want to grab this guy's die animation. We want to hit play on it. And then at about here, we want to add an event. Events. Why am I not seeing events? Is it because I'm looking at the wrong die? It is because I'm looking at the wrong die. One of them was legacy animations. Okay, so at about here, we want to add an event. And, oh god. I think I really need to rename this function is my primary problem right now. Because I have to keep going back into the animation event receiver and grab process animation event, which is just slightly too long of a name. If this was just animation event or something, I feel like I could better hold on to that data in my mind. Death. But every time I go to add a new animation event, it's just problematic having to remember what exactly this thing's called. Although if I use it enough, eventually I'll remember. So it's hard calls. Because it is somewhat descriptive. So at about here, we're going to process an animation event, and we're going to call death, which is going to cause it to start fading into the ground. Cool. Now, all that being said, I could just have the death animation trigger happen at the end of the animation. That could be another thing I do, but I just kind of like the flexibility of the events. It does mean more work for me in the long run, though. So that thing's dead. Other pieces of information we'll need to do, and again, I'm going to write this in the backlog, but when a character dies, we should probably remove them from... That didn't work. Why did you not save the information I wanted? Did I not hit apply? Apply? Click off, click back, click on the event. Okay, set this time. This one here, click on the event. Have to keep an eye on that. But the other thing I was saying is in the UI, I should probably get rid of the name of the character. So inside of on character death, remove name from UI, question mark, only enemies, question mark, because we might want to heal characters, so we may not want to remove them. Okay. Moving right along. I just want to test to make sure we can kill all 3 enemies. So we attack the ghost. Nothing should have changed here. He should just die and then fade away. Sweet. Death Knight should die and then fade away. He doesn't fade quite far enough. Cactus Man should die and fade away. Okay. This value that we fade them away on, though, might need to be dynamic depending on the size of the model, but for now we'll just fade it a little bit further. And go a little further underground. So they're all dying. So now let's get back to the victory condition part of this. So let's see, what do we got here? Next header. Okay, because we've got all of this set up. KO should be happening. It's not squashing down. We have our own set of death, but characters are dying. Okay. Health. I mentioned in a previous lesson that you could modify the health component to have a minimum HP field so that you could specify values other than 0 and have some enemies not actually be KO'd. I went ahead and added a feature. Check out the repository if you need help. Basically, it receives the minimum field in all places. I had been referencing 0. I had this so that you could have special victory conditions where you need to target a single unit, and the single unit needs to be able to live another day. For a typical RPG sort of story, it escapes. Interesting. That single unit needs... Basically, I referenced the minimum field. In all places, I've been referencing 0. Minimum HP. So you could specify values other than 0 and have some units not actually be KO'd. This seems to be a more advanced thing for cool, like, victory conditions. I'm not quite following because I don't remember. Obviously, I haven't read through all the previous lessons in a while. I'm kind of cherry picking the ones I need at any given moment, so I don't quite remember this. But this sounds cool, and I should probably look it up at another time. I'm not going to put it in the backlog right now. If I need this, I will find it, I'm sure. Now that we have enemies, we can have a real game. By this I mean that we can have a sort of condition upon which to base whether we win or lose. Create a new script called base victory condition and add it to the script's controller's victory condition directory. I will break the script down into several bits. Okay. I want to read through all of this, but let's start there. So base victory condition, and it wants to be in the controllers. So I think, again, I think that we chose not to go with the term controller and instead decided to go with managers for a lot of these terms. I need to rewrite this object pool. I remember that. Loading manager. I don't know where I want to put you. Base victory condition. Where do I want to put base victory condition? I feel like it should be in the RPG elements section. I feel like it's kind of part of core right now, so let's just stick it in there. Okay. Now, open this guy up. Let's kind of break down each piece of this script as we go, so that we fully understand what we're bringing into the project. So it is a base victory condition. It is a mono behavior, so it'll get attached to something. It'll have alliances, victor. Okay, and it will have victor equal none. So this is class abstract. It should provide some common functionality that will be reused, but it only forms the base for other subclasses. In a full implementation of a game of Final Fantasy Tactics, there are a lot of different missions with a lot of different objectives. For example, you need to find an item on the game board, and enemies might spawn until you find them or they are defeated. You might need to escort a unit, either keep it from being defeated or a certain number of turns, or you might need to simply defeat all enemies or defeat a particular enemy unit. For our purposes, for a JRPG, I doubt I'm going to have many different victory conditions, but having this flexibility will always be useful. To external classes, the only thing that appears in the class is the victor property. When a battle has just started or is in progress, the property will return none, meaning that there is no winner. The script will self-manage and listen to events posted by other classes to determine when a winning condition or losing condition has occurred, and then it will update the property accordingly. Sometimes I will post an event for something as important as deciding that a battle has been decided but in this case I will simply check for a victory whenever changing states. Okay. So we need this chunk of code right now, and we need to drop that in here. So there's more sample code to come, but this is just the base version. Now, he wants us to add the battle controller. We'll need to reference the battle controller so we can reference other content like the list of units. So I added a field and assigned it to the awake method. Note that the methods are marked as virtual in case subclasses need to extend or change any of the logic. Makes sense? So that's here. Now, that being said, I don't know if we have a battle controller. I don't think that's what we called ours. I think we based it off of his, but I think we called it something slightly different. Now, I don't remember. It has been a while since we set this stuff up. Was that the state machine? This is the combat manager. This is the ability sequence manager. This is ability state manager. In our game, we called it something different. It's one of these guys. I think we set up each of them. Do we not have this written somewhere? I feel like I was smart and I wrote this down at some point. Opening up Google Drive on another screen. Aha! The value of keeping things around. Okay, so we have the UI state machine, which initializes, waits for character for active character, ability selection, target selection, ability sequence manager keeps a stack of abilities ready, the battle animation state machine, which initializes, waits for ability, displays ability names, plays sequence animation, triggers ability effects, wait for sequence to complete, and then waits for a new ability to come in. So the way our game works is we have the UI state machine, which is primarily handling basically just receiving and inputting RPG commands, and then we send all of those commands into basically a queue, which is handled by our ability sequence manager, which gets referenced by our battle animation system, which basically takes each of these abilities in turn from the ability sequence manager and outputs the attack basically. And then we have the character combat manager, which keeps track of filling the progress bars. So this thing, I'm not sure why we have this line back to here, but I assume this is the loop, is once we finish target selection, we check. Really, this goes back to here, not to here, but effectively this is waiting for this thing to have a new character active. I'm really glad I built this. That's cool. I'm glad I have that to reference. So, based off that context, let's just keep reading and see which pieces we need from here. We need to reference, okay. Let's see now. We need this chunk of code, which he's going to explain in the next paragraph. So for the time being, I think the root thing is here. We have to get rid of this because we're not sure if we're using it or not. We'll bring it back if we need it. Next, I register notifications that a unit's hit points have changed. So anytime something hit points have changed, we want to check for game over. Since I didn't specify a sender of the notifications parameter, it will send any sender. Note that this will check for the game over every time a unit's HP actually changes, even if it's getting healed. Actions in a turn-based game like this don't occur very rapidly, so we won't notice a performance issue, blah, blah, blah. Yep, that all makes sense. Okay, is defeated is the next thing. Now tell me what is defeated is. With this method, I can determine if a particular unit is defeated or not. Since we've added the minimum HP feature to the health component, I can check whether or not the value has been reached. I suppose that this is that it is possible there may be scenarios where some units may not have a health component, although I don't know what that reason would be. So as a fallback, I simply check the stats component. Okay. So here it's checking, is unit defeated, is checking to see if a specific unit has its health set to its minimum health. If it has a health component. But if it doesn't have a health component, we check to see if its health is set to 0 via stats. Okay. Sure, that seems reasonable. So this would be a victory condition in which there's a specific unit that we want to get to 0 in order to win. This could be useful for like a boss battle in our game, seeing as we're going with a more traditional JRPG. Alright. Now, party defeated. This is the one we're probably ideally using. Okay. Next, I have a method that can determine if the party of units has been defeated. This method loops through all the units which the battle controller has references. If a single unit of the party alliance is not defeated, then I can immediately return that the party is not defeated. If I loop through and all the units are not found an exception, then the party is defeated. Okay, so we basically check to see, hey, is this type, go through given this type, get the alliance pieces, or the alliance components, make sure that if the type equals type and is defeated, which we have this function now here to check if its health is equal to min health or is 0. Good. Okay. That all makes sense. We're just looping through the units, checking alliance type, or getting alliance type, checking to see if it matches me, and then is defeated. The next question would be, are we... so here's going to be our first issue, is that this is getting the battle controller, but we don't actually use the battle controller, so in our game, who controls the list of units? That would be our combat controller manager, I believe. But it doesn't hold it as one centralized list. It holds it as 2 lists, the characters in combat and the monsters in combat. Do we even use the alliances yet? Sorry, I keep going back and forth, but I'm trying to remember where we are. So if we go into Unit Factory, are we applying the alliance game component? We are. We are setting heroes and enemies. Okay. So for simplicity's sake, I think what we'll do is we'll just jerry-rig this. So we're going to go combat, character manager, .instance.m characters in combat, which will give us all the character models. This wants it to be units. And then units get component alliance. Inside of the character model, would that be the prefab that we would be grabbing? Yeah, I really want to rework the combat character manager. This thing here, it does what it needs to do, which is basically handle the ability progress bar, the active time battle bar, or the ATB bar. But it doesn't handle the storage of the characters and the monsters in a really clean way. So I kind of want to revamp that a little bit. For now, we will do this. That's not going to work. Maybe it will. So the problem is, where does the animator sit? Does it sit on the root with the top level scripts, which we need to access? Or does it sit somewhere else? We're going to have to finish writing the code and then we'll double check this. That being said, is defeated is going to need the unit object. Again, this is a problem. But we should be able to do the same hacky piece of code here. Do I want to just do the character manager refactor right now? The fact that I'm having to write all of this hacky code kind of indicates that I really should. All of this stuff gets added. On load. And then we grab specifically the animator. For the time being, the most hacky solution, which will get us where we need to be, is we can add the unit to the character data. This is not a hacky solution. Okay, it's a hacky solution, but it's not the worst. It is more effective than what the code I was going to write, which was kind of just continuing to add stuff in bad places. Here, at least I'm kind of adding this code to one location. The primary problem I'm really seeing is the fact that I decided to separate the monster model and the character model, when there isn't really much of a reason to do so, and they kind of have overlapping values. Okay. So I will want to change this part eventually. But this at least gets us something a little bit closer to a copy and paste of the existing code. Okay. The difference here is the second for loop we want to loop through the monsters in combat. I want to replace this value and this value. Okay. So now we've got party defeated working, and we've got check for game over, party defeat, victor equals enemies. Okay. Basic level, that's working again. I'm going to write down again in my backlog. Game data, let's rename this tab to backlog. We're gonna do base victory condition .cs is where we want to make this modification. We want to refactor party defeat to only have one for loop. And this is kind of all part of one central goal. If I stop hitting end and going to the end of the spreadsheet, this is part of the central goal that we want to refactor character manager. What is it called? Combat character manager. Refactor combat character manager to only have one array for monsters and characters. And this is kind of a subtask that I don't want to forget that's part of the refactor. So these two are kind of tied together. I can't think of a better way to do that right now, unless I was using something like Trello or Jira, some better bug tracking system for backlogs. But I'm just going to maybe just highlight this in a light orange in order to help remember that this one's slightly different. Yeah, it doesn't matter. I'll find a better way to track this data later. Okay, so then that's the base victory condition hooked up with our system. Okay, so finally here's the notification handler, which checks whether or not the party heroes have been defeated anytime any unit hit points have been changed. I only check for this because of all mission types can be lost by letting the entire party be defeated. On the other hand, defeating all of the enemy party may not necessarily constitute a win. I will let the subclasses extend from here and determine that. So this is the base level. At the base level, we assume that if the party dies, the game is over. But we can have other victory conditions for our battles, which is what we're going to get into here, which is the basic victory condition of defeat all enemies. So create a new subclass, which is called defeat all enemy victory condition. All we need to do here is override the base class and check for game over. Be sure override the base class's check for game over. Be sure to maintain the functionality by calling the base implementation. We still want to lose if all the party members are defeated. In the event that the hero party has not been defeated, so that the victor would still say none, then I proceed to check whether or not the party has won. In this case, the players must defeat the entire enemy party to win. Okay, so then we need to add a new script, which I'm going to add to core for the time being. Called that. And that script will look like this, which is what we just explained. Double click to open this script, replace. So this is checking game over. It's overriding check game over from the base condition, which is this guy. So it's basically changing this thing here to first do the basic version, which again is making sure that if the entire party is defeated, then the enemies have won. And if the victor is none, which means we're not dead, then check to see if all the enemies are dead. And if all the enemies are dead, then the heroes have won. Cool. I am going to set up this defeat target a specific target condition. I don't need it right now, but we're just going to bring it in case we do at a later point. I don't want to have to dig back into this, go back, find this page specifically, and grab this chunk of code. So we're going to just grab this piece here. We're going to go back into Unity. Double click. And bring this piece of code online. With the missing bracket I keep seeming to miss, which is basically specifically having a target. Looking for that target is defeated. Cool. So that way I can have a boss, and as soon as you kill the boss, the game is over, whether or not he has minions still alive or not. Cool. Cool. Next steps. We've created these conditions. I assume it's going to be hooking up. Because the maps might be reusable with different enemy sets or story elements, some portion of the battle configuration should be dynamic. In other words, we don't want to attach a victory condition to anything in the scene, but instead we want to load one during the init step of the battle based on some sort of external settings. Yeah, we don't really have that yet, I don't think, despite my good advice. I don't have such external settings yet, so I'd simply specify a particular entry and manually configure it. I chose the victory condition where you don't have to defeat the entire enemy party. You merely have to defeat the enemy leader. In addition, I modified the min hit point value of the enemy so he isn't actually defeated. He will live to fight another day. And this is add victory condition. So we just need to add this somewhere. This will kind of be our next task, is actually doing what he just described there, which is hooking it up properly. This is part of the reason I also want to think about refactoring combat character manager, is because right now this thing kind of just does a init coroutine, which just loads a bunch of stuff from design data, but really it should be coming from an encounter list for the enemies based off the zone we're in, and it should be coming from a team manager which manages the team, and potentially that team's value shouldn't be coming from design data directly, because we might want to have characters be hurt and stay hurt after battle. So I'll get to it later, but for now let's just add this victory condition apply thing into here, because this is our primary entry point into the game. It kind of handles most of this logic anyways. I don't care about a specific enemy. I'm not going to use the defeat target. I want to do defeat all enemies victory condition. That's not what I wanted. It helps if I know how to spell defeat. Owner. We don't have an owner, so we're just going to do game object. We don't need this, and we don't need this. We're just going to create this victory condition. And we just need to make sure this value is the same. Okay, so now this thing will, on enable, set up a notification that listens for any time the HP stat changes. It will check to see if enemy, or if our characters are defeated, blah, 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 blah. It's doing all the things I want, and all I have to do is add it as a component, and it will do the rest on its own. Yeah, I really want to refactor this. So that's kind of the big bold one right now for me, is that once we finally get this loop complete, which we're close on, I want to also refactor to load characters based off of a team manager, and then refactor. There's a lot of refactoring I want to do for the combat character manager. Refactor combat character manager to load enemies based off of zone encounter data. Cool. Just writing these things down so I don't forget. So we're initializing, everything's great. So now once everything is dead, we should get this check for game over. But is that check for game over doing anything right now? I don't think so. That's probably the next paragraph here. Just like in our intro cutscene for our battle there, yeah, we didn't build an intro cutscene for our battle. There needs to be an outro cutscene. Whenever this battle state enters, it should load the story based on whether the battle has ended or not. In some cases, you may also wish a different scene to play based on whether you won or lost. Of course, if you lose, you should go to a game over screen. The example below does not reflect final code. A better example would not to hard mode references to resources, blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool, cool, cool. The part I'm really looking for is battle over. Okay. Just some other pieces that are getting cleaned up at the end here. I was just skimming through. So the thing that I actually want is this. Yeah. I want to have a m underscore base victory condition. Base victory condition is equal to whatever this thing is. If base victory condition victor equals heroes, then the players won. If it does not equal none, then the battle is over. Now, I will want to have a whole bunch of UI stuff eventually that will trigger and do a bunch of stuff that's really interesting. For now, I just want to make sure that this is working. So in here, again, I want to change a bunch of this stuff, but let's finish the loop. This is what I've been trying to get at for months. I've been thinking about this and not having any time. Let's just finish it. So if the battle is over, scene manager. We wrote some code the other day. Transition between zones. This. Give me this. I'm going to hard code some magic. Okay, if the battle is over, transition to forest take 2. So this doesn't matter whether the heroes won or if the enemies won. It's not even going to show a battle over complete screen. But when we kill everything, we're going to go back to forest take 2. This is awful. It's generally kind of horrible. But now we should be able to kill everything. The victory condition should be met, and we should respawn back in our forest level. At the very beginning of it, but we should respawn. Null references. Unfortunate, I say. This is because we're not finished initializing yet. So we need something similar inside of the base check for game over that basically doesn't try and check to see if the game is over before the character manager has finished initializing. So if we haven't finished initializing the game, none of these values make sense. So don't try and access them because you're going to get a bunch of null references. UI stuff. I guess I said that at some point, didn't I? Pork belly roast. All right. I haven't been focusing on actual... I haven't been paying attention to stream at all. I'm just kind of here doing my thing. If you're watching, you're enjoying, I take it, or I appreciate it. But right now, I'm focusing on completing a thing that I've been wanting to complete for a while. What was the error I just got? It took a while to load, and when it finally did, it complained, and I was busy chatting. To myself, as usual. We're still getting null reference objects somewhere in this list. Object not set to a reference. Is it the unit? This should be getting set to here on character. And then on Monster data. I did set it up as well, didn't I? I did. Object result get component unit. No enemies have been spawned yet. The characters have been spawned, but we haven't spawned the enemies. So why is it that we're trying to check when we're not finished initializing? How are we getting into here? Okay, well, let's take a look at the call stack down here. We have post notification on HP did change, check game, party defeated. Interesting. We're going to have to write this code in each of these locations because the base is going to just return, but we kind of need to leave. I don't think I've run into that problem before. I'm sure there's a way to solve it. Maybe it's that instead of returning void, we should actually be returning like a fail condition in this case. And if the fail condition is true, it should just return out immediately. For the time being, we're just going to add this here because that'll get rid of the problem and get us up and running. But that's a thing to think about. Why, oh why? Yeah, I think the solution there would be base should return a success or fail bool. And if it's a fail bool, then just the any inherited children should also return out immediately. Okay, so we're in. We're no longer getting null references. Now we should be able to defeat each of these enemies. And upon killing each of these enemies by attacking them once, because they all have one hit point, as long as we don't miss. Null reference, object not set to an instance. Okay, not there yet. Camera dot enabled. That's because we still have a problem with our transition manager. For now, because this problem is dumb, and I need to do a little bit more work to make it not dumb, let's just comment out all the spots where camera is used for the time being, because the camera is being set as a direct reference, which is a problem. We need to have some sort of camera manager that actually is what we're pulling that camera reference from, rather than transition manager being a direct reference. Also interesting that the transition manager doesn't exist in this context, but it still loads up fine. I guess that's how we built our singletons. Die, cactus. Die, Death Knight. Okay, let's see here. Do tween failed for some reason. For a number of reasons, actually. Okay, so in order for this to work, we kind of need our transition manager to exist in this scene. And it doesn't. This is something I talked about in the previous... in the previous part as well, is right now this thing is existing in scenes and it really shouldn't. It should really be an object that gets loaded no matter what scene you're in. It should be in its own very own scene, which is like the transition manager scene. And if you're loading into a random scene, that random scene should have some component that says, if your transition manager doesn't exist, please load this scene, so that it's always when I need it. That canvas is blocking things. We change its sorting order to -1 should solve it. Nope. Okay, there's a problem. Canvas group? Is that what the component I'm looking for is? Block raycasts. No. Aha. Basically, the transparent black image that we use to fade between scenes is overlapping everything else. So I just need to make it so it doesn't block raycast, so that it doesn't interrupt our UI. Okay, and we got out of the combat scene and into the forest scene. Super janky, but we got there. Let's go the other way. Let's do... I have no idea where I'd want to put this code. I'm going to write some jank. Again, I am just trying to get some stuff working. Create C# script. Random battle temp. I don't want this to be the eventual script that I use everywhere. I just want to try and get to the point where we walk around the forest. We get into a random encounter, which basically all it's going to do for now, because we don't have any proper data initialization for combat scenes, it's just going to load up the scene. It's just going to do a scene transition, and then once we've done that scene transition, we'll fight, and then we'll return back to the forest. But we're going to return back to the entrance of the forest because we don't have anything that like keeps track of the player model. We'll have to add all this stuff on, but again, trying to get the most basic version of this thing up and running. Don't know if transition manager is the right call for this random battle, but let's see. Let's do time.delta time. Let's add a variable in here, which is literally just going to wait so many seconds before dropping us into a random battle. But eventually this should probably be based off character movement. So every like pace that the character moves, it adds to a counter, and that counter has some random threshold that decides when a random encounter will happen. 10 seconds? Don't think it really matters. In fact, it should probably be lower. So 5 seconds. Transition, and this is transitioning not to the forest, but to the combat scene. Which is going to be sample scene, which we'll need to change at some point to a real name that actually makes sense, like the combat scene. So what does this actually do? Transition manager starts a coroutine. We get the current scene. We fade down on the thing. We do an async load, we fade up, and then the transition's over, and we were doing some stuff with camera, but we're not doing that anymore. Okay, so it doesn't care about the player, it doesn't care about anything that has to do with our actual level design levels, it's just doing a scene transition with the fade. So, shouldn't care that we're going into our combat scene. There's not going to be like, oh, place player in a specific spot. None of that code exists yet. Okay. So then let's go cancel. Let's hook up that script. This is a public value, so I actually have to set it to 5 here, which is annoying. Should probably make it private so that I can just set it in the script. Actually, no, it probably should be, the real version of this should probably be public because we might want to have different, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter right now. Okay, so we've got this random thing that isn't random. It's actually just after a set 5 seconds, it'll load us into the combat scene. Let's go to here. I got rid of that extra canvas, right? Yeah. And now it's in here. So because we don't have the thing that's going to load the transition manager, depending on what scene we are in, we have to always load from town 1. That's the only way our game will work right now. We go into here. Things are lagging quite terribly. Okay. What is happening? What did I write that's bad? something is eating up performance like crazy. It could just be my computer. We have been streaming for 2 hours, but something about that seemed weird. Also, the fade didn't make any sense. That did not feel like 5 seconds had passed. Did I not save the forest scene? Maybe it was still at 0. Because technically it doesn't matter what value I put in the scene. Oh, no. No, okay. This value should be private. I accidentally changed the time passed value, which was setting it to 5 so that it didn't have to count up by delta time at all. It was just starting at 5, so it was just initially just loading in. I was thinking that that value was my trigger time, which was the 5 seconds, and it's not. The trigger time of 5 seconds is hard-coded into the script. So we walk around, and after 5 seconds, it transitions into combat. Something is running really slow, though. We've done something rather painful to Unity, and I'm not sure what that is. Let's get that out of the way. Here, let's add that canvas group and make it so it doesn't block raycasts. That's why we couldn't click on anything in the UI. Is it still running slow? No, now it's running more smoothly. I wonder if it was just having the animator window open at the same time, because it was viewing the character model, and that has a lot of animations. Okay, so we're running around. After 5 seconds, it transitions. It is complaining that we have 2 audio listeners in the scene, which is a problem. We get into here, we attack the ghost, we perform the attack animation, we can queue up attacks. Oh shoot, I attacked the ghost again. Well, that's a reason to make it so you can't do that. Okay, he attacks that guy, he dies, we attack that guy, we fade out. We're now in the forest. We can walk around in the forest for 5 seconds before it fades back into combat. It breaks the second time we get into combat. Interesting. That's a fun problem. An object not set to an instance of an object. Interesting. We register to the game object pool and we try to add this. And something was busted. Super interesting. Okay, let's look at audio listener. Why do we have so many audio listeners in the scene? Let's start there. When we transition between scenes, we get an extra audio listener. Move into here, we have 2 audio listeners. Audio listener? I wasn't fast enough. We got in there and then transitioned. This is a minor thing, but I just want to try and get rid of some of the warnings we're getting. Okay, that's a minor one, because technically both scenes have cameras for a second. Okay, I don't want those messages then for time being. I do want warnings. I do want errors. I wonder if there's a way to disable this specific message. There must be. Okay, regardless, we attack the ghost. We attack the cactus man. We exit out to here. And then we break. This is probably the real issue. This is some singleton we found, I believe. Interesting. It's because the object manager we built, game object manager, gets destroyed when we switch scenes, which basically just means on destroy, set it to M shutting down. When we come back up again, it's technically still exists because it's a singleton, so it's just been set into the shutdown state. If on destroy we just get rid of this variable for now, will that fix this problem? Or will it cause more issues? It's possible that the game object pool manager maybe shouldn't be a manager at all and shouldn't be a singleton. Is it trying to pull the still dead monster from the second battle? Looks like Twitch chat isn't updating in the bottom right. Now it should be. Apparently I had it stuck on UI stuff for like half an hour there. I guess it was just updating the last time I pulled it up. I don't think so. Yeah, so I think, let's see, we'll get through the second one. What it looks to be referencing unblockable characters is it's referencing... man, our lighting is completely messed also. Something about transitioning into the scene it really doesn't like. Okay, we go back in a second time. Basically, the game object manager, okay, yeah. It was a weird technical thing where technically we were destroying the singleton, which was game object pool manager, and basically once that thing was destroyed, it was being set to shut down. But a singleton doesn't really go away, it's static, it just kind of exists. So now it's just set into shutdown mode once the object that it was being held on was destroyed. And then when we load it back into the scene and we recreated that mono behavior, it was still a singleton, so it just referenced the original static version of itself, which was shut down, so it just returned null, because it should already be destroyed. I'm gonna just get rid of shutdown for now. I don't think this is the right call. I feel like there's something bad that I'm doing by all of this, but for now, that should be fine. It's not like it's making multiple singletons in the background, it doesn't seem like, so I don't think it's gonna cause a memory leak. But yeah, so now that we've got those weird errors out of the way, we should be able to kill everything and just keep looping back and forth. Come back here. Again, we start at the beginning every time. It doesn't matter where we are because we're just loading the scene. We have no character positional data yet or anything. We attack, we kill each of them. And once they're all dead, we'll load back into the forest. And then if we leave this scene, if we're fast enough, we can get to the town, and the town doesn't have that random generator, so we're able to walk around here fine. But as soon as we walk back into the forest, after 5 seconds, we'll get back into another battle scene. Oh, goodness. So that is what I would deem semi-loop complete. There's a bunch of problems here. Let's start writing them down. We've got... let's see. I think what I want to do is I want to insert above. I want to insert a tiny column to the left. I want to make it way small. I'm going to get rid of this coloring. I think this is refactor. Combat character manager. These are all the tasks that lie under it. Maybe that's not how. Maybe I do want this all in one column. Delete column. Make this bold. And make this section slightly gray. And insert above. And then we'll just basically categorize this. And this is general backlog. This is a specific task. What color was this? Was it right above the teal? Well, it is now. All right, and then we'll bold this as well. So these are just general, this top list is just general things I want to do. This bottom list is specifically a large task, which is the character combat. Combat character refactor. Okay, so lighting is weird if combat scene is loaded into. Save character world position and return to it after combat. So we should basically enter and leave combat whenever we like. We should enter combat and return after combat to the same position in the world. We also want to add battle complete UI / fanfare, so that when we end a battle, it doesn't just end. Save character position. Okay, let's play some more. I feel like there's a bunch of other things that I need to remember to fix as well. I kind of want to just take a quick look at what's going on with the lighting right now. So all these lights are turned on. Are they all supposed to be turned on? Is that the problem? I can't imagine something weird happening. Okay, they all are turned on. But the lighting controller, I think, is supposed to do some magic stuff. I can't remember what the script did that we wrote, but it basically highlights a character with lighting. It's what causes the characters to get like specifically highlighted if they're the one being attacked, or the attacking and defender. Okay, so the lighting's fine here. This is the way it should look. If we go back into town, load from the town, enter the forest, 5 seconds later get into combat, our lighting is messed up. See if we can discern why. So lighting looks fine here. Let's check on main entity lighting. So some of the values aren't bolded in here, but I think that might just because... No, the values look the same though. 1, 0.5, 1. Yeah, they all look okay. They have easing controllers on them. They seem to be set to okay values. Oh, did it flicker there? I missed it. Yeah. And now our lighting is messed up. So something about loading into the scene from a different scene is causing issues. Okay, I don't think I'm going to be able to solve that right this second, but that's interesting. Yeah. I'll have to dig into that way more. That's not a simple bug. That's a pretty advanced one. At least it seems like it. I'll basically want to document everything about the call stack and the order of operations and the stats on all of those lighting objects between the load normal and the load from town scene, and try and figure out what the two differences are. Find something that's different and then try and figure out why that difference is happening. Alright, well, bit hacky, but kind of doing it. What else do we need to do, though? I mean, there's tons. There's tons and tons of stuff that needs to be done. I guess the other big one is we need to build an actual random generator, or random encounter generator. So we want to have, not this one, this one. We want to have a random encounter. I don't want to say generator, but manager? Based off of character movement. We kind of also want I remember what I was going to say. We also want a encounter design data. And we want to load encounters based off of a levels zone. I don't know how else to put this, but basically I want to have encounters which are like, hey, this is encounter 1, encounter 2, encounter 3, which says specific enemies that I want to spawn in those encounters. So we know that right now our IDs are actually these values. So we could have a encounter which is one monster, which is cactus orange, and then we could have another value which is ghost blue, and we could have 2 of those, and that could be encounter ID 2. And then we would want to have one of these sheets already set up. It isn't. Then we want a rename zone, and we want to have zones that are like forest, and forest would have these encounters. Probably more like this. And forest 2, which might just have just encounter 2. And then we might want to give odds to these things. Like there's, I like using lottery systems. So like, hey, this gets 5 tickets and this gets 20 tickets. And then we basically pull a ticket for add all these numbers up, so 25, and we would roll a random number between 0 and 25 or 0 and 24, and then if it's between 0 and 4 or 1 to 5, whatever, you basically, if it's between 1 and 5, you get encounter 1, and if it's between 5 and 25, you get encounter 2. I'll get to that eventually, but that's usually how I do random chance. Zone, encounters, chance of encounter. This isn't clear to you guys, but it's clear to me. Encounter tickets. So how many tickets each encounter has. And in most situations, you probably want them to have an even amount so that you pretty much get the same chance of every encounter. But you might want to have control over this. But essentially, that's another task I want, is I want to be able to go into the forest scene, and in the forest scene have some random encounter script and be able to put in a string value saying this is zone forest, and then when a random encounter happens, we check the design data, we say, hey, we're in the zone forest, grab me one of these random encounters. This random encounter says that it is cactus orange. Great. Based off cactus orange, we want to spawn just that one enemy, and that's the whole encounter. So we want to do that data at some point as well. Okay. Let's play this a little bit more. Right now I'm just on a fact-finding mission to see what other tasks do we want to come up with, at least around the combat system. Because now we're kind of completing the loop, and now we really need to start thinking about what are the next pieces to really refine it. This is the third stream. I didn't get to one last night like I was hoping, but I kind of accomplished a lot of what I wanted to do in this stream. I'm not sure if that's sarcasm, Kazukish, or if you're actually excited. We did not get into a random encounter. Why are we not random encountering? Okay, cool. Just checking. I think it's my own insecurity that I'm like, oh, I'm such a bad streamer. I never stream. So I read that in the most negative way possible. So why did I not get into a random battle? What broke? We didn't train. Oh, because we're not in the town scene first. Because that's the other huge thing we need to do, which I should probably do right now. But in case I get distracted, I'm just going to write it down. Backlog. We 100% need a transition manager scene, which gets loaded if it isn't loaded on start in any scene. It's a really weird way to put that, but yeah, basically we need to have that transition manager, which right now exists only in town 1 here. This thing here needs to exist in its own scene that gets loaded, and any other scene in the game needs to check to say, hey, does the transition manager exist? No? Then load that scene, because we need the transition manager to switch between our different areas of the game. Okay, so we're in the forest, we're walking around. After 5 seconds, the transition manager exists. We transition to battle. We have a bunch of gibberish data, but it's all design data that's in spreadsheets, so we can modify all this stuff pretty rapidly. I think we need to build more ability types like magic and stuff, but for the time being, this is kind of working. Our lighting's messed up. We've got that written down. We kill the cactus man. We've got written down that we need to get rid of selecting targets that don't exist anymore. We have written down that we need to have a battle screen when we complete a battle. We get into another combat after 5 seconds after returning to the forest. We've got it written down that we need to keep the character's position when we switch back and forth between the forest and combat. Okay, and then if we are quick enough, which I don't think we are, we're going to get into a combat first. Yeah. It is cool that the battles get faster and faster to load. I assume because some assets are already loaded in memory and aren't getting unloaded, which is also a double-edged sword. We'll probably need to figure out some way of solving that as well. So if we run fast enough, we should be able to get to the town before the timer. Okay. Cool, cool. Let's take a look at our goals. That goals page just kind of needs to get moved to the backlog. So we need to visualize HP. I actually think that's less of a problem right now, but I'm still going to add it to the backlog. Visualize enemy HP. I'm gonna drop this one down and expand it. I'm gonna make this a priority so that I can start prioritizing my tasks. This is low. That's all I really care about right now, is I want to make sure that I don't work on that right this second. There's a bunch of other stuff that's more important. More ability types. I think this one's also low right now. I can add more as I need them, but I'm more concerned about getting it so that there's kind of a semi-balanced system. And if all of that system is revolving around just a single ability, which is attack, I'm fine with that. Import stats from design data. This one I think is actually fairly high, because I think this also falls under this kind of encounter data thing. Is that these kind of are my next steps, I think, is I want to get more of the design data actually inside of these spreadsheets and less hard-coded, because we've got too much stuff right now, like the enemy's health, our attack, like a bunch of different values that are too hard-coded. The last thing I'll write down real quick. Nope, that's my state controller, which I'm going to be adding to. Is I want to have some sort of team manager, which is going to be controls the current party and saves their stats. HP, poison, etc. And we need this to exist outside of the combat system so that as we switch back and forth between the overworld basically and in battle, this information is saved. So this is a high priority. This is a fairly high priority. Well, I want to move both of those, and I've only moved one. High. This is medium. It'd be good to make it so that we can't target enemies, but it's not disabling my ability to play the prototype. Improve disabling unit models. This is low. This is a good thing I should do, and I want to have it written down, but not something I want to tackle right now while I'm kind of just getting stuff up and running. Hey, welcome to project management. Also, FYI, this is a large part of what game development is as well, is having to keep track of all the things that you need to do. What am I doing? What is this so-and-so doing? Right now it's only me, but the nice thing about having this all documented is if I ever got help on something, it's, hey, here's a backlog of stuff that needs to be done. Can you look into why the lighting is weird? I actually think this is kind of medium because it's super annoying that the lighting's kind of messed up. This is medium. This is probably something I'll want to do in the near future, is set up the character. This is something I think I would want to do on a level design screen because it's actually fairly minimum coding, but is kind of neat. This is medium, maybe to high. I think having the end screen is pretty valuable. Random encounter manager. This is medium. It'd be nice to have, but not necessarily good. And I think this is high. Having the transition manager exist between all scenes would be good. This whole task set, which is to refactor the combat manager, is also high and will also be necessary in order to get some of this encounter data stuff importing properly. So there's a bunch of things that I need to do. What do we want to do now? Oh, what do we want to do now? To be honest, I'm just super excited that even in a janky way, we've completed the loop. We now have attacking, characters dying, a victory condition being met. It's instantaneous, but whatever. And we go back to a screen. And then we can loop back into that combat and then fight again. The fact that it's all kind of garbage is not great, but Cavers95 asking, did I model these dudes myself? Nope. All of this stuff comes from the Unity Asset Store. All of these props, primarily the ones that we're using the most are I really love this style. So this is one of my favorite packs, is this little Hero Mega Pack. This thing is full of all kinds of objects. Character. All of these dudes are wearing interchangeable objects. So this hat is completely interchangeable with this helmet. You can kind of build a whole bunch of characters using that. The Toon enemy pack I really like. I've got both of them. They have some really cool looking monsters. Really like this Toon enemy pack and Toon enemy pack 2. And then most of the stuff in the overworld is coming from the Simple Fantasy pack, which is also pretty cool. I think even the UI elements I grabbed from some free packs as well. I don't like that this camera is always off in the middle of nowhere whenever we load up this scene. I wonder if it's resetting to 0, 0. Okay, I've kind of documented my highest 5 priority tasks. I don't think this UI one is a long one. Estimate. I think that this is fast. 1 to 2 hours. 1 to 2 hours. Couple streams. A stream. Four hours. There's some off camera time that I need to do in order to figure out this refactor, though. I don't want to do it all on camera. This is 1 to 2 hours. This is like 4 hours. Fast. Unknown. Fast. Fast. An hour. When I say fast, I actually mean less than 1 hour. Okay, so I think based off these estimates, I think I want to try and tackle this, and this will probably be the last thing I do for the stream. Yeah, we've been going for two and a half-ish hours. I think I'm starting to get a little burnt out. There's a lot of actual code stuff, which kind of bogs me down a little bit while trying to have to talk about it while trying to actually do it at the same time. So let's just try and get this canvas manager, or this canvas, which is really the transition manager. Let's get it into a new scene. So let's create scene, transition. It's not really transition manager. Really, the scene needs to be kind of our between scene. It needs to be global. This is our global scene. It kind of needs to exist always. I don't know how else to say it, so we're going to call it the global scene. Global scene contains just this. We go into town. We can now delete that. Now the global scene, save with it removed. We essentially want to make sure this thing is loaded no matter what. So how would we do that? We want to do a new script, which I think needs to be under our town scripts. I need a better categorize these, but I'll do it once I have more of them and I have a better understanding of what the folder structure should be. So this is load global scene. And then on start, this thing needs to check. How does it check to see if the global scene has already been instantiated? I guess we could do a quick check to see if the transition manager exists. It's not ideal. Yeah, we don't want to access. The tricky thing with accessing the singleton is if it doesn't exist, it will create it, which isn't always the functionality I want. I guess I actually want this logic. This call is actually super costly in Unity, find object of type. But seeing as we're only calling it at the start of each scene transition, hopefully that shouldn't be too bad. Returns the first active loaded object. If this returns null, which is what I assume it should return if it doesn't find the transition manager, then we should do a scene manager load async. On global scene. Hey, Werefox. Welcome to the stream. Scene manager doesn't exist in this context. That's because we need to use Unity Engine Scene Manager. Okay, so basically the script's pretty straightforward. On start, it will check to see if it can find a game object in the scene of Transition Manager. If it can't, it will load the scene global scene. Not the greatest thing I've ever written, but it should serve its purpose. Okay. Create object, add, load global scene. And then the other thing we'll need to make sure we do here is actually add the global scene to, cancel. Project settings. It'll have to be in the project settings for this to work. Okay. So now, global scene checker. This basically has to be in every one of our scenes that we create from this point forward, so that it always makes sure to load it. It is unloading. Hey Tempest, welcome to the stream. Why is it unloading? Also, sell it. Why is it unloading my stuff? Scene manager unload scene async. additive. I need to add it additively. That's why. So we were just basically starting the game and going, yeah, whatever you're doing in the scene, don't care. Let's just load only the global scene, which is not what we want. Which is not what we want at all. Okay. So now this should load up, check to see that we have no global scene, and then load that global scene. Ideally without unloading the forest take. Okay, cool. It's doing that. Now we need to add this script to each of our scenes. To the sample scene and to the town scene. Okay, now no matter which scene we load into, let's do the forest again. It's kind of in the middle right now. Because we kind of transitioned from town to forest to battle. So we're going to go into the town. Our lighting's messed up. Okay, interesting. Let me transition back to here. Now our lighting's way too bright and we have all this stuff. Then we load into the sample scene, but we have 2 sample scenes loaded. Okay. Alright, fair. Totally fair. What happened? Okay, so we're here. That was fine. There was no issue there. Lighting's still messed, but that's for other reasons that we haven't figured out yet. Oh. I need to reduce the game data down just to 1 enemy so we just have to attack once. Really? Stop missing! I guess the other thing we need to do is actually hook up enemy AI as well. So now we have 2 forest takes for some reason. Which both forest takes then load in. Why did adding this global scene checker break everything? My best guess is that Transition Manager is unloading the wrong scene. Get active scene. I'm guessing that get active scene is grabbing the global scene and then unloading that instead of whatever the actual active scene I think is. So rather, see this, okay. I just want to get the transition manager in. The other way we do this is rather than a scene transition, we could do it as a prefab. So we could make transition, oh, so I'm going to rename this to transition manager. Because it's what it is. I know it's a canvas too, but it's what it is. So the reason we're doing this is we want to get transition manager into whatever scene we load. So whether we load town, I'm going to also, why does this have its own settings? What is the sample scene settings? Oh, that's the lighting. It has lighting data associated with it. So if I rename this as combat scene, does that break everything? Does it also need to have its lighting renamed to combat scene? I don't know. I'm just going to do it. Okay, so each of these scenes reference loading the global scene. The other way we could do this rather than loading the global scene, which is kind of messing up the scene manager, is we could just load a prefab, which is this object. The reason I kind of like the global scene a little bit more, though, is that the global scene allows me to eventually add more stuff like I've talked about in the backlog, like a team manager. So I could have the team manager exist in the global scene, and it just kind of exists and doesn't get unloaded ideally. I feel like this must be functionality that exists. Is any of these... Doesn't really exist that way. How does it determine which scene is active? This might be a question best asked to the internet. Internet, what would I do if I want to have a global... I don't know if this is the right way to say it. Global scene in Unity. That's not what I wanted to do. Let's try this a different way. Unity active scene. This is checking versus... These aren't quite the answers I'm looking for. Turn a scene on and off. Do not destroy, unload Unity scene. Nope, not quite what I'm looking for either. I think the problem is that from the transition manager's point of view, the active scene is the global scene because it gets loaded after whichever scene we start. So the other option would be, and I don't know if this is going to work long term, but we can at least try, is we could do scene manager get active scene. I don't think I need to pass anything in for this. What is the return type? The return type is a scene. So scene current equals this. And then can I do scene manager set active scene to whatever the current was before the load? I guess technically I need to write a bit more code because this has to be asynchronously done. So we need to do a start coroutine, which has its own set of problems. Okay. It's okay. It's okay. So we're going to grab this call. We're going to call that here. We're going to grab this function. We're going to call that down here. We are then going to do this. We're going to replace this load asynchronous with this. If it's not done, we return null. We set the active scene after the while loop has been exited. And we get the active scene at the start. Okay. So now we're dealing with the fact that it's asynchronous. We get the active scene, load the global scene, and then set the active scene to whatever the current was. The trick will be that we never want our global scene to be the active scene. And I'm not sure if we can really handle that functionality. That's the tricky bit here. I didn't actually expect this to take more than 5 minutes, to be quite honest. But this is turning into slightly tricky. A slightly tricky task. I have a run 60-second ad break on Twitch. Does that actually work? That can't work, right? It's a highlighted button. What broke? Sample scene could not be loaded because it is not added to the build settings. What did I break? Where did I try and load sample? Oh, right. I'm this thing. I changed the name to combat scene and I haven't modified it everywhere else. Please load combat scene. Where is the transition to town? It's over there. I want the player to be closer so I don't have to run so far every time I want to get into town when we load up this scene. Yeah, something gets super messed up. Even with that functionality added. Yeah. So it sets the active scene to the forest after we load global scene, but after we unload the forest and go into town, global scene was the last scene to be active, so it becomes the next active scene again. Which is unfortunate, to say the least. So I want global scene to kind of exist outside of the scene manager, which seems like a big ask. Unity scene never active scene. This is more people complaining about things not working. Interesting. This might actually be what we're looking for. So this person's asking, is it possible to load a scene asynchronously but keep it inactive and only activate it at a certain point? Set active scene exists, but I need something that sets scene inactive. Scene dot allow scene activity equals false. When you want to activate it, just set it to true. Keep in mind that you can't unload it until it's made active at this moment, so you can't decide later on. There's also a bug that can happen when loading multiple scenes like this, where it just don't load anymore and progress is 0. Had this happen a few times where it stops loading anything after I loaded quite a big scene. Unity basically expects scenes to be active before you load a second scene to operate all without bugs right now. This is a year ago. Okay, so it's not perfect. The active scene in your scene will be used as a target for new objects instantiated by scripts. When you add a scene actively, the first scene is still kept as the active scene. Use this to switch the active scene to your scene you get targeted. Is it a problem with Transition Manager, maybe? Is that the other way that we could tackle this? Transition Manager technically unloads whatever the active scene is. But the active scene is being set here technically. So we could do Scene Manager, load scene additively, unload the current scene, and then after we finished... We're not waiting for this unload to finish, but I don't think we do. I think what we need to do is set active scene. But we need to get the scene itself. Can I get scene from Scene Manager based on its name? Get scene by name? Scene name? Scene Manager, get scene by scene name, set that to be the active scene after we finish loading it. And then we unload the current scene, which is whatever the active scene was before. I'm actually going to do that after this. Maybe that solves it, is we just need to make sure that whenever we do a transition, we make sure to set our active scene to the scene that we just loaded. That way global scene never becomes the active scene? Question mark, question mark, question mark. Okay, transition. Okay, scene 1. Oh, our lighting is fine now too. Okay, transition, force take 2. All right, all right. And if we look at the bolding up here, it's always saying, okay, I think we solved it. We're King of Kings. Now, we also have this problem with the audio listener, which again, magic, magic, magic. If we, instead of having the audio listener be on this camera, we can remove the audio listener from here. And this is less than ideal. But we can go into the global scene, save scene, and we can add the create an empty game object, add audio listener. Okay. Audio listener. Okay. Now, because we've done this way, I think another piece of functionality we can do, which is kind of nice, is we can get rid of this don't destroy on load, because technically this now exists in the global scene, which never gets destroyed and gets loaded on start. So we don't have to have that don't destroy on load functionality. Okay. Good. Excellent. So now we just have to go back into the main scene as well. Where did my scenes go? I've lost my scenes. Here we are, Town 1. And we just need to find the audio listener in Town 1, which should be under cameras, camera, remove. The tricky thing about this is now technically that audio listener isn't on the camera, and generally you want audio listeners on cameras so that the sound sounds close or far away based off of where the camera is, and yeah. Referencing script on this behavior. Game object is missing. Prefab painter scene settings. Prefab painter scene settings. Now I'm just trying to get rid of all bad references. So if we switch scenes, we shouldn't have the audio listener problem anymore. But we do still have this reference unknown on this behavior. which is apparently on the prefab painter scene settings. The reference script on this behavior game object is missing. What is this object? I don't even see it in the scene. What do I have selected right now? It's a game object that doesn't have anything? Why is it creating a empty object? Prefab painter scene settings. What are you and why are you broken? I am unsure what this reference is, this missing reference, and why it references an object that doesn't exist. I'm assuming this is because I copied this scene from the base one and something's broken, but I have no idea how to track down. I think that's this. Yeah, that was it, but I don't know how to find it outside of hitting play, because play is when it yells at me about that warning. But the problem is it doesn't exist in the scene, like it's not a game object, which is part of the reason why it's complaining. So I'm not sure how to get rid of it. Like permanently, because it's going to keep regenerating every time we hit play and stop play. The only other thing I can think of, which is really, really bad, but let's take a quick look. I just want to try and clear up our project. I don't want to see these warnings every time we launch. Let's go into Town 1. Let's go into Open, Show and Explore. And then let's edit Town 1 in Notepad++. This is awful. Okay, well, you can open up Unity scenes as text files. And so if I open with and then do a search, I find the object. The tricky thing is where to delete from where. Because depending on what you do, you can royally mess up a Unity scene by deleting something that you really shouldn't. So, in order to get rid of this thing that doesn't exist, except it does exist and Unity's complaining about it, the best course of action would be to delete it here. But I'm not sure where to where. Like, maybe I delete here and see what happens, because this is the game object, but do I need to delete this line and or this line as well in order for it to work? Because these seem like pieces that, like, separate it. I'm going to guess it's probably this is what I need to do. But I'm going to do that off camera. So we found it, and I've explained what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do it off camera because I want to back up some files and things before we go messing around with Unity scenes. I want to back everything up on source control and everything. So cool. So we found a problem. I'll fix it off camera, but I think that should solve it. Is basically just find it in the actual, open up the scene in a text file, and then away you go. But we now have transitioning between scenes. Our transition manager exists in all scenes. It doesn't matter which scene we have. We always just need to make sure to add the global scene checker to that new scene that we create, and we'll always have our transition manager at the ready. We're able to transition to combat. This is still busted. No idea why. I assume it's because some sort of camera settings are carrying over from the overworld, but we'll dig into that another time. I think that's a bigger bug. I don't even think it's an interesting bug, though. Now our camera settings are messed up here. I'm guessing that's because our camera settings from the combat scene are transitioning into the forest scene. Yeah, because now our camera settings are fine if we go from the forest scene back to here. So it's got to be scene settings. Something about lighting isn't updating properly, because now lighting's fine, and now lighting's fine. So there's something about transitioning between scenes that messes up the lighting if the lighting settings are different between them. Huh. That's a fascinating problem as well. But I've narrowed in on that lighting problem now from the combat stuff, and it is about scene swapping. Not because something's breaking in the lighting controller stuff that we set up. Because I thought that it was something to do with our highlight management system. Cool. Hi. Hello. I'm just rambling now. How are you? So... done? It's not perfect, but it definitely is working. So the next question would be, what do we do next? And I'm not sure. I think all of these tasks are going to be a couple hours each. I think that realistically, these aren't going to take me 3 to 6 hours for all 3 of them. I think all 3 of them are kind of intermingled into just getting like stats and encounters and stuff into the game from spreadsheets, and getting the team manager set up. Like, it's all around getting combat to be a little bit more dynamic. Right now it's all kind of hard coded to just load these 4 characters and these 3 enemies, but those 3 tasks are around making this whole thing dynamic. And I think that's probably going to be a stream in and of itself. It's just making the game dynamic so that we can load in random things. I think the UI is a big task. I think setting up a fanfare screen is a bit of a thing, because it also means modifying our state system. Is there anything else fast that I could do real quick? I don't see anything low priority that I really want to tackle, and I feel like I'm running out of steam. So at about the 3-hour mark, I think this is probably good. Let's call it here for today. Next stream won't be tomorrow. I'm not sure when the next stream will be. What was the up arrow for? Did I miss something? Oh, fun ramble. Lol. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure when the next stream will be. Let's call it here. I think next time I'm probably either going to jump back into something more relaxing or more carefree, which is like just filling out the forest level some more. I still want to do a lot more level design of just like building a world, but I kind of also want to play with the combat system a bit more. We spent the last 2 streams messing with cameras and getting kind of assets built up and figuring out how we want to lay out our world. I think that's all feeling good, but now I'm still unsure about the actual combat system. So I think maybe, yeah, next time we'll try and tackle more combat. We'll continue working on this backlog of tasks. I think I'll probably try and get this up and running so that we can kind of start playing with like tuning and like actually finessing, like, okay, you have one hero that you start with, and there's enemies that are like 1 or 2 enemies, and they start dealing damage, and if you die, it resets you back to the town or something like that. I think I'd like to try and get that up and running, and that really revolves around all of this stuff, which is getting more data coming in from these spreadsheets, so it's easier to quickly tune things, and having it so that the character is saved in a team manager, and it's not preloading a generic team of 4 people every time you get into a battle. I think the other thing that would go along with that would also be this medium task would come after that as well, which is saving the character's world position and returning it to it after combat. That would kind of fall into these pieces as well. So I might try and tackle that as a core concept, which is random generated battles that are based off design data with a team that is static, and their HP and stuff actually persists between each of our battles. Cool. So that'll be for next time. For now, though, this is going to be... okay, let's end on a better shot. What's a better shot? What do we end on? This looks cool. Let's just hit start. Yeah. Let's not end on a spreadsheet. Let's end on cool things. So yeah, the next time we'll set all that stuff up. But for now, I'm pretty tired. I think I got a lot accomplished, though. Feeling pretty good about transitioning into battle, actually able to complete a battle, go back to that scene, and, you know, we're getting there. So again, next time we'll set it up so that the characters actually persist, their data is between battles, and have it so that there's actual random encounters where they're generated based off of our design data. For now, this is going to be Tolhi signing out. Later, guys.